the subscribe button and the notification bell right now so you never miss an episode of Operation Truth. Send us an email, ask your questions, and very possibly we'll address your question on the air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hello, everyone. This is Operation Truth. With me, as always, is my co-host, Tom Fuentes, a former assistant director of the FBI with a rather distinguished career. He's spoken to it a couple of times. I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to delve into it today, but I think you would find it incredibly interesting what he accomplished in almost 30 years with the FBI. While we're talking about Tom and the FBI, I want to talk about domestic terrorism. And Tom, if I understand this correctly, and I was just educated by you, there are distinctions in terrorism that occurs in the United States. Is that correct? And can you just elaborate and give us the differences?
Right. Domestic terrorism means that you have a group that's a domestic group, basically. Now, it can be Aryan Brotherhood, or it can be the Ku Klux Klan, or it can be, other groups within the U.S. that are U.S. based, U.S. born and raised, let's say. International terrorism are, even if Hamas or Hezbollah or Al Qaeda or ISIS or any of those groups, even if they commit a act of terrorism in the U.S., it's international terrorism. So like the attack on 9/11, the Al Qaeda attack, taking out the towers in New York and Pentagon and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, that's international terrorism because the plot was designed overseas, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others, and it was basically supported by Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden to do an attack in the United States. And it was predicted by Osama bin Laden for about a year or two when he said that they're going to attack the U.S. on U.S. soil. So that's kind of the distinction of domestic terrorism. So that's why when you hear the FBI talk about the domestic terrorism program, does that mean Christopher Wray is talking about MAGA? Trump supporters are somehow domestic terrorists, or people that protest at a school board meeting? That's domestic terrorism. So groups like that, the government, or worse yet, the most terrible threat that we face, of course, are Catholics worshiping their mass in Latin, like in the Catholic Church in Richmond. That's domestic terrorism in the FBI view.
Do I sense some sarcasm, Tom?
Not some, a lot. I'm very critical of that. I'm very critical of the most recent couple of years leadership in the FBI that has basically done its best to ruin my beloved FBI that, as you mentioned, I spent almost 30 years as a special agent, working my way up to an assistant director level. And I have no appreciation for seeing the FBI do what it's doing to conservatives, basically, the two-tier system of justice of the FBI, starting with Comey, then Christopher Wray, with the support most recently of Merrick Garland and the Biden administration. I think it's a tragedy. I think the importance of what the FBI means to the people of the United States has been just thrown out the window. And luckily, all the travels that I'm doing, even now internationally, the reputation of the Bureau worldwide is still that it's the number one agency in the world, law enforcement agency in the world. But here in the United States, they're doing their best to, current leadership, Christopher Wray, doing his best to allow the reputation of the FBI within the United States to basically go downhill.
Tom, I've been very vocal about, my views and my concerns about the border. I haven't really allowed you to speak to it or queried you and your perceptions or your feelings about the border. What are you thinking about this border issue yourself, Tom?
Well, if you don't have a secure border, you don't have a secure country, you don't have a sovereign country, and the potential threats to it are just unbelievable. And it can be at the northern border as well. You remember, 15 years ago, the threat, or 20 years ago, the threatened attack where an Islamic terrorist crossed the border into Washington state, and luckily was stopped by a border patrol officer being very alert and making that arrest and having explosives in the vehicle, that person was on his way to attack at LAX airport in Los Angeles. Luckily, that plot was thwarted. And that's just one person crossing the border at one very small checkpoint in the state of Washington, D.C. You have now the borders wide open, northern border, and particularly the southern, which we see because of the tens of thousands every day that come across. We see that there's no protection being provided the American people by people crossing that border.
Tom, something that's being stated by law enforcement officials more and more consistently is the fact that we've lost operational control of the border. What is your feeling on that?
Well, it's absolute. And if you talk to, the former heads of Border Patrol and the U.S. agencies from Homeland Security that worked the border during the Trump administration, they commented then that it was the most secure, not 100%, but it was the most secure in the history of the U.S. And then these same individuals are now going on the air and saying they've never seen anything like it. It's the worst. It's gone from the best to the worst in the 3 years, basically engineered by the Biden administration on purpose. This isn't some accident of enforcement or lack of intelligence or something. The administration is allowing this as a matter of deliberate policy to occur.
I agree with that observation, Tom. What I'm thinking about is, what is the end game? What's the agenda here? What is it they're trying to do? Are they trying to change the ethnicity of the country? Are we trying to turn it into a third world? Because the tragic part of this discussion with people that migrate here is we don't assimilate them. We don't help them culturally adapt, and we do them a disservice in doing that. Sadly,
we never had provided that direct assistance. What would happen is that you would have people become into the country and then become naturalized U.S. citizens, and then they would basically migrate to a community of people that was similar to wherever they were from. If they were from Mexico, they went to Mexican neighborhoods. If they were from Ireland, they went to Irish neighborhoods. And as a result, the people in those neighborhoods that theoretically had already assimilated helped them assimilate to the culture, to the language, to the school system. But now when you have millions cross, there's nowhere for them to go where they're going to get any kind of support that's meaningful to learn the language, learn the culture, or learn any of that. Now, the people that come in legally and then become U.S. citizens legally, like my wife did just a few short years ago, she had come in as a Canadian citizen. She had been born in China, but she came in here. We got married 10 years ago, actually last week. And, so she was on the path to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. And during that time, then I went to the swearing in ceremony, which was in Manassas, Virginia. Several hundred people were being naturalized, were given the oath, and they listed as they called their names to come to the podium, come to the stage. They listed what countries they were from. They were from everywhere: Russia, China, India, everywhere in South America, everywhere in African countries. They were from all over the globe, and they had to test. They had to go through an elaborate procedure, actually, having their fingerprints taken multiple times. They had to bring in police reports of their record from every country they ever lived in and provide that to the immigration authorities. So all of the vetting that they went through and all of that, and they wanted to become U.S. citizens when they swore the oath to become a citizen. And now you look at these millions pouring across the border. What oath are they swearing to? What police records are they bringing with them to show that they're going to be law-abiding citizens? And by the way, that also included medical testing and vaccines just to come in at that time also. So the people that are crossing our border now, we know they're bringing diseases. We know they're bringing, possibly the attitude to hurt the United States or hurt other American citizens. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know all of the bad motives in people that have come across.
Tom, as I try to remind people, the purpose of this podcast is not contention, but truthfulness, and to problem solve. And guys, I know this might be a tough one for people to wrap their arms around, like the ACLU and maybe Talib and Omar and some other people that are concerned we might violate someone's rights. We're living in different times, and one of the keys of survival is your ability to stop on a dime and change direction. What I've spoken to before with you, Tom, and I think you concur, anyone coming into this country, regardless of its point of origin, no matter where you're from, submit your DNA and your fingerprints. Would help us immensely in identifying who's carrying out certain naughty activities.
The change from currency systems to fully digital cashless societies has intensified fear around the world. In mid-September, Wells Fargo and Truist banks planned major layoffs as an impending 2024 recession has been predicted by many economists. Many analysts are predicting silver will hit an all-time high in 2024. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. Green energy demand will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
I want to go to Christian Briggs, if I may. We've been trying to get, I've nicknamed Christian, I have a new name for him. I call him Busy Man because this is a busy man. Christian, I want to hit you real quick, buddy.
Sure.
Give me the impact, the influence, what this Israeli war in the Middle East translates to in this country in a broad sense and in an economic sense.
Well, it's always not good to join you and Thomas. So let's talk about a little bit about the macro view. So the macro view is that you've got more conflict surrounding Eastern Europe, Middle East, and I would tell you that with 100% certainty, China will go toward Taiwan sometime within the next 6 to 9 months. That this is an absolute certainty, and I would too. If you're Russian President Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping of China or any other Middle Eastern country that looks at the United States as being vulnerable, now is the time, because why? It's vulnerable. So from a macro view, we're going to be fighting 3 wars. Now, we've been already fighting these 3 wars. When Israel was hit by Hamas, we've already been fighting wars. How much money have we sent Ukraine? 125, 150 billion dollars. How much money have we given Israel? How much money have we given the Middle Eastern countries, even the ones who are not our allies but our foes? So we've been fighting an economic war. Now we're fighting a physical, military, actionable war. So China, looking at the weakness, more importantly though, Lou, they're looking at how thin our military as well as our economics are spread thin. This is the perfect timing between now and April, maybe as late as June of next year, with the Israeli conflict running hard. China is going to move on Taiwan. Why? Because that's what I would do. Anybody with common sense understands operations and logistics. This is the time when you can minimize gross logistics. In other words, having to have too much money, too much men. You can do it thinly. In other words, you can do it less logistics because we're spread thin. So China moves on Taiwan. They capture 97% of the high grade or military design chip industry. See, what people don't realize, what Israel's conflict did, it weakened the United States severely. Not that we weren't already weak from administration that believes that more social policies are more important than military or economic policies. Now we've got China moving. 94 to 97% of all high level, which are either military or high priority type standard chips, which are used from laser guidance to cruise missiles to nuclear warheads, everything comes from Taiwan of any real consequence. If you were to move Taiwan and you were to capture it, what have you effectively done, Lou? You captured the generation or the next generation of chip manufacturing, chip use in military applications. And since those chips are routinely changed 6 months every 12 months, why? Because software development moves at the speed of light. What people don't realize is software has to have capacity double every 18 months because software's ability to move more and more things and to do more and more AI technical aspects evolves and doubles every 18 months. So capacity of hardware has to double, chips have to double, but then they routinely change out those chips through different types of hardware to be able to meet the ever increasing demands of increasing the software capabilities. So what that translates to is in 1 year from now, in theory, if Taiwan is captured, then we're going to have I want to say it's an incredible issue. It's a killer national security issue because then we're not going to have the chips that continue to build, strengthen the military through increasing capabilities of whether it's laser guidance and that new system or the Iron Dome that Israel is using, which is actual lasers that shoot down drones. Okay, you think those don't take chips? Do you know there's over 200 chips now in a new Mercedes? There's 200 semiconductor or wafer chips in a new Mercedes, 200. Some cars are taking 400 chips, not one, but up to 400 chips. Now, if you don't have new chips, how are you going to make new cars, new planes, new trains, and new aircraft carriers, new anything when it comes to military applications, let alone civilian or public applications? So with that said, the economics are incredible. Now, let's talk about what impacted on the economy side. Today, there's 2 articles. Bill Ackman said, I have now covered my short positions in treasuries because the threat of conflict and world war is so great. I don't want to be stuck on the wrong side of the trade because what happens, Lou, when we go to war, it's a flight to safety. If I was in equities right now, I'd be crapping my pants and I'd get the hell out of the market. If I was in bonds right now, I'd be loving I'd be loving life all the way to the bank because why? Bonds are at some of the highest rates of return in 15, 20 years. So why would I want to risk equities? Okay, I don't want to be risky. I don't want to be in an environment where equities can take a severe downturn because earnings get hammered. Why? Because of a war that breaks out. I'd rather be in an area or an asset like gold and bonds. There's a huge article today that says Wall Street is now turning to gold and running at the speed of light to gold as a flight to safety as well. So bonds and gold are going to be the winners for the next several years because this conflict isn't going to go away. Hell, the son of Hamas's leader today said, America, we're coming for you as well. Be ready. And what happened today, Lou? An off-duty airline pilot rushed the cockpit and tried to take a plane down and smash it into a building over Portland. That happened today. They were able to deter him, and now he's been arrested for attempted 83 counts of murder today. And so now we know this guy was trying to crash, just like 9/11. We had our first potential terrorist attack from an off-duty American rushing to crash an airplane today.
What was his ethnic background? Do we know?
We don't. We look at him as I read several reports. Of course, I don't want to go out on a limb here until it's confirmed because look what happened to the New York Times when they rushed to say Hamas was the ones blaming Israel, and Israel was the one that blew up the hospital, which we know now it wasn't true. So let's wait till the facts. We know this for sure. An off-duty Alaskan Airlines pilot over America tried to turn off the jet engines and crash 83 people over Portland. So let's wait to understand who he was and where he may have came from. But the fact is, it happened today.
I have a question for you, and this
Sure.
is something that came up in prior episodes with Tom. Tom and I find it rather unusual that this invasion of a sovereign nation took place without anybody picking it up on the radar screen through our intelligence communities, whether it be the U.S., the British, Israelis. What do you think about that? Because I know you bump around D.C. Any feelings?
Well, yeah, lots of feelings. You know, we always have feelings. The question is, what do those feelings translate into actual facts, right? So if we're talking about how did Israel miss Hamas coming across the borders, and it's one of the most secure places in the world. Hell, they've got more walls than in my house here. So the real answer is, did they know? I mean, that's an answer. Did they know? But yet to be determined, right? Or we may never know, but we know.
Well, you know, the part of this conversation that's interesting, and Tom and I spoke to it, both administrations, both in Israel and here, are in trouble. You know, and I hate to be so suspicious, but what better way to distract the American public or the Israeli public than by getting involved in something that would take their focus off some real issues like our economy, our borders, our major cities, our foreign policy, this whole misguided discussion regarding our energy sector, this transition to electricity that just ain't happening, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I hate to be so suspect. I'm wondering, did they think this was going to, they'd let them come in and it wouldn't be the scope and scale that it took on, you know? Were they prepared to have a little incursion? Isn't that what Joe Biden alluded to in the Ukraine, Christian? He said, you know, even if it was a little incursion, it might be okay. Isn't that what he said?
Of course,
And
he
I,
says a lot of things. He always tells us what's going to happen next. I mean, I remember when he was running for campaign when he said, we've got the greatest election fraud operations in history ready to go before 2020. Well, no shit. He was right. So the question is it's not what he says. We all know what he says is more accurate at times than anybody else out there because he can't keep his mouth shut. Remember what Obama said, if you want to get things really messed up, leave it to Joe. So look at where we're at. He has literally made every decision opposite of the right one. If you're not following this, then you're not understanding what real detrimental effects can be done when you're really trying to destroy something. And his opportunities are so vast to take us down, to distract us now from many things. But don't forget also the corruption of him and his son and now his brother, because that check popped up for $200,000 the other day, which shows Joe Biden received $200,000 from his brother. The day James got it, next day he writes a check to Joe. The distraction is incredible. They always tell you what they're going to do before they do it with these corrupt people. But at the end of the day, now that we're in this mess, we've got to take appropriate steps to safety. And that's the reason why when you asked about Ukraine, what are the effects? What's the effects about Israel? The bottom line is you've got Bill Ankerman over that Pershing Square Fund. This guy is one of the richest guys I've ever met, ever known, not personally, but when I say met, being, in fact, I've seen him before, I've listened to him, I've watched him closely. He's made some incredible trades, and he has, without a doubt, made it very clear today. There's just way too much hostility, and there's way too many chances for World War III to come about, because when it does, and it will happen, now whether it's a tactical type or a conventional military show of force, and then we go to that type of war, or we use a nuke, which nukes now are more commonly talked about. That's what gives me real pause. It scares that it's not even like, oh my God, a nuke was mentioned. No, it's like, oh yeah, they're mentioning nukes again. So with him running to the true flight of safety of bonds and gold, it makes you wonder what he knows. He makes statements that are clearly based on evidence rather than gut emotions. Think about that, Lou.
I want to ask Tom a question because I'm gonna now shake your memory, Tom. Do you remember that comment that Biden made about a small incursion or a minor incursion would be acceptable in the Ukraine? And the reason I bring that up is because that is something that concept, that notion could have lent itself to what took place in Israel. You know, Tom, do you have a recollection of that statement being made?
Yeah, I remember it clearly.
Yeah.
He said that, and a short time later, Russia goes into the Ukraine. That basically he was saying if it's a minor incursion, which in fact, what Putin did at the time, the tanks, went toward Kiev. And generally speaking, it was a relatively minor incursion. It wasn't huge, but either way, we didn't react to it except to send more money to Ukraine to beef up their military, which we had been doing since 2014. So yeah, Biden absolutely made that statement. Then later he made the statement about, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is not going to, succeed. It's not going to come online. We're going to take it out. and then lo and behold, it blows up. Well, who took it out? We promised to take it out. We took it out.
Christian, I want to ask you something. I mean, we're hearing more chatter about funding the Ukraine to the tune of $61 billion. Give us a long-term impact of the funding of this war. I mean, where does this all end? And I do believe that there is a bit more pushback from the Republican side of the discussion than the Democrats. But now we're not only funding the Ukraine, we're disproportionately funding on the low end is Israel. Like Israel's being given about less than 25% of what they're funding. But what's the long-term effect of this? I mean, how much money are we going to give the Ukraine, Christian? And what's the long-term potential impact?
Well, as long as Biden's president, we're going to continue to give forever, because the corruption that Zelensky has on the Biden crime family is overwhelming. It was a syndicated amount of crime. In other words, they were doing this in China, Romania, Ukraine. There's evidence of 4 to 5 other countries that were involved with paying for any kind of meetings or consideration of influence. So the amount of money may not be even realized yet, because when you've got somebody over the barrel in a position like this, think about all the things that have happened that have been so detrimental to the so detrimental to the country, that it almost looks like Biden was being told what to do, which in my belief is completely exactly what's happening. So if it's 50 billion or 100 billion or whatever it may be, I don't think we're going to stop giving for some time. The only thing we're going to do is the House is going to have to realize that we can't continue to keep giving and put a stop to this and let Biden just fall on his own sword. And then Russia will ultimately take it. You got North Korea that has, last week, there was evidence shown that North Korea supplied so much military aid to Russia. Now, that could have only come down through China's okay. And Iran would have never backed Hamas and would not be backing Hezbollah if it didn't have reassurances from China, North Korea, and Russia that it will be supported in the event that it goes into conflict with the United States. So the Ukraine was just one piece of a greater puzzle that President Xi has been working on for years. Once Biden took office, it was game on. They're like, now we've got our man in the White House. And that is what Biden is. It's their man. So they organized what I would consider to be one of the greatest takedowns of America's economic supremacy. And now you're witnessing the military aspect of it. And I can tell you why it's an economic war. Today, I can confirm that for the first time, the digital yuan, which obviously is a a Chinese-backed currency baked by gold. In other words, they backed it with gold, so it's baked in the credibility of the digital yuan because it's got gold behind it. Today, excuse me, the digital yuan did an oil transaction with OPEC for the first time in history. For the very first time in history, the digital yuan was used to purchase oil, which that is way ahead of schedule. Now, the yuan has been circulating among the OPEC members and other countries around the world, part of the BRICS membership, for years now. But it is now the number one currency in and out of China. It's now doing oil sales, but the digital version is what's backing the Chinese growth to become the ultimate reserve currency.
Rare coin prices have exploded in the last 3 years. Hard Asset Management, one of the world's largest precious metals and rare coin dealer firms, makes recommendations on what to buy for collectors who know what they're looking for. We maintain one of the world's largest rare coin inventories for individuals seeking to diversify precious metals and rare coins. We can make strong recommendations in areas that we feel have the strongest potential for long-term growth. Call today, 844-426-4653 to receive our free rare coin newsletter, or register online at bmcham.com. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
Interesting. I want to ask you a question about the Republicans, because you brought up in a very broad context how compromised the government, this presidency, could be with a number of countries that you mentioned: Romania, Russia, China, the Ukraine, etc. Are the Republicans slow walking this thing and going after him? You're rolling your eyes. You shouldn't be thinking about this. You understand what I'm saying?
Unfortunately, I do. I think the compromise is across the board with 80% of Congress. The 20% are the holdouts that have maintained the consistency of integrity and character. They're people of faith that don't want to go and do something that sounds great in the near term, but the long-term consequences are so severe. Because look, we're not going to live forever. We have kids, we have grandkids. What are we doing today to ensure their livelihood and life viability? Like there's commercial viability. What are you doing to make sure the businesses? Well, I asked myself this the other day. If the Democrats are so gung-ho about being great people to help all, why are they doing policies that are so bad for the majority of people? Don't they realize that they've got kids and grandkids and great-grandkids? They may never meet, but yet they're going to be legacies of their actions. The consequences will be felt almost immediately, but not to the level it will be in the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Look at the great New Deal that Roosevelt did. That's a horrible. What he did was, and what did LBJ do? His great war on poverty? Hell, the minority communities went from 87% mom and dads with families to 17% within 2 or 3 years. So you paid people not to be married. You paid people not to have a united and a family unit. You made it better for mothers to raise children by themselves and for dads not to be in the household, all because you wanted votes.
That was the fallout of the I believe it was 1965 welfare.
Right. Welfare and food stamps.
That was the impetus to that, interestingly
right.
enough. You know, when I asked you that question about the intelligence community failure, you're spot on. It isn't what we know, it's what we can prove. But I will say, sometimes it becomes the sum of all parts. And I'm really struggling to understand how something of this magnitude could have gone undetected. Especially, I hate the latest on the Israelis, because the Israelis talk a big game. There's an expression, never let your mouth write a check your body can't cash. I don't know how, of all countries, because they're not bound by laws and treaties and encumberments that we are. You know, every time we turn around, we're looking at something to do and making sure that we're not going to have to answer for it. They just do what they need to do for the preservation of their state. Tom, I see you chomping there. What are you thinking?
Actually, you know, I agree, especially with what Christian's talking about, that, you know, the Chinese now moving into an area that was exclusively U.S., you know, our currency, our digital or not currency, but it was the U.S. doing business with OPEC and the oil producing countries. Now you have China dealing directly with them out from under us. So I think that, yeah, the strength of the U.S., the strength of our economy, the strength of our military is now finally being shown to be just way overrated. And I think that's the problem. We don't have any of the strength we used to have. And to me, a big part of that is the current administration is well on the way to making sure that we're not as strong as we used to be.
You know, Christian, and one of the other broadcasts also, I brought up Iran. You know, a lot of talk about Iran arming, funding, motivating. I said to Tom, and I think Tom concurs, I'm curious to hear your opinion. I think confrontation with Iran isn't an if, but a when. I don't know how we keep sidestepping this. And I know that you're well aware of how we have patronized them. And I would say on some levels, potentially even funded what's gone on with Israel right now. What are you thinking?
I would have to tell you that if Israel invades Gaza, you have 370,000 IDF troops, reservists, as well as full enlisted men, that the ramifications are going to be so great that the Middle East will literally rise to a point where there'll be no boundaries of what they do, where they do it. My guesstimate is that we have about 2 million sympathetic or sympathizers to Islam. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to go out there and blow stuff up. That's not what I mean at all. I mean, these are people that more than likely would say, I'm more in favor of what they're doing, but I would never want to do it. And so the Israeli conflict is going to create, maybe it should be this way, maybe it shouldn't. I don't know. But the inevitability is the theory of chaos. Whatever happens was inevitable. So you're going to see Israel move into Gaza at some point here. They're only standing down right now is to negotiate hostage release. Okay, and that's a great thing. I'll give credit where credit's due. But at the end of the day, Hamas has made it clear. Hezbollah has made it clear. Hell, ISIS and Al Qaeda have now started to step up, saying we may want to join this fight against Israel, which is considered to be the little Satan, the big Satan, and this is the actual words used. Thomas has heard this before, is the United States, the little Satan, the big Satan. So with that said, their job, their mission, their livelihood, their way of life, their everlasting being has been made on one thing, and that is to destroy the United States simultaneously by eradicating Israel, period.
I said something similar to that in one of the other podcasts, one of the other episodes, that for people that think that this aggression that's being directed towards Israel is limited to them, you're grossly mistaken. There is sentiment to destroy Western civilization. That's just the reality of it. I agree with you also that invading Gaza is going to turn a corner potentially. You know, a lot of people talk a big game. Iran's talking a big game. They're threatening. If in fact Israeli IDF troops invade Gaza and Iran steps up, that's going to take this thing to a whole nother level. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then it'll be.
It's not just if Iran steps up. The one country nobody's talking about that's more powerful than Iran is Turkey. And yeah, Turkey is supposed to be a partner in NATO and all of that. I don't believe that. I think that Turkey has already indicated that if Israel steps this up to a point where the other surrounding Arab countries take on Israel and want to fight with Israel, that Turkey will join them. And Turkey, they have a 1 million man army. They're way above Iran or any of these other countries in capability to militarily not only take on Israel, but if we get in the middle of that and get into that war with them, which sounds like it's on its way, I don't think we can defeat them. And I don't think we can guarantee, and this is to me the big bluff that the U.S. is doing, we're going to make sure Israel remains a state and a sovereign country. I don't think we're in a position to guarantee that if the entire Middle East Arabic country world countries gang up on them and us.
You know, Tom, sadly, I agree with that statement you just made. And I said in earlier episodes that Israel's likelihood to survive this episode is predicated on the amount of military support we can give it. And I do agree with you, even with that support, if this would take on a certain scale, and you just spoke to it with Turkey, for example, becoming part of this discussion, we might not be able to save them. You know, the issue at this point is, I hate to say it, saving ourselves. I don't think it's pleasurable to entertain the fact that Israel will no longer exist, but that's a possibility.
Yeah, we're between a rock and a hard place on that, because
I agree.
We're guaranteeing that Israel is going to survive because of the U.S. support, kind of like we guaranteed the Ukraine, and that country is almost on the verge of not existing either with our great U.S. support. So I think, you know, the expression I think you used earlier, we're writing checks that we can't cash. And this is another example of that. We're telling these countries, we're going to protect you. We're going to be there. We're behind you solidly. Well, are we? And could we be? That might be the other issue with regard to Israel, is what guarantees can we make and how many countries in the Middle East can we take on at one time?
I agree with you, Tom. And I think Christian used this term a little earlier that I was going to use, being spread too thin. And I think that's what Israel's facing right now, along with us. And I think we're at a really interesting crossroad. That's one of my own opinions and observations. You know, these are not pleasant conversations to have, ladies and gentlemen, to be candid with you, because they could take us to a point where civilization could end. We have
Mhm.
enough nut jobs running countries with access to nuclear devices. Russia has more nuclear devices than we do. It
Hmm.
doesn't take many. And the thing I also learned about people is that when you back them into a corner with no way out, they'll resort to almost anything. And at this point, and I know Tom and I may differ in this, I think Russia's capabilities have been degraded. He thinks they've been bolstered. I hear his argument, and there is some validity to it, but I also think that Russia's spread it a little too thin also, although they've got some interesting guys in their corner. China, for one, you know what I'm saying? And I think the coming days in Israel and this threat of invading Gaza is going to be a corner turner, is all I'm going to say, gentlemen. We're going to have to let it go for today. Christian, busy man.
Thanks.
Try to make you, I know, buddy. I say that in a complimentary way. You're busy.
Yeah.
Try to make yourself a little bit more available. I hate to say it to you on behalf of the
Yep.
production.
You give a compliment and you take it away in the next
Yeah.
phrase.
Yeah.
I give him the backhand.
Oh, wait, I completely understand how busy you are, but don't let it happen again.
Right.
That's kind of like you, Tom, with the FBI. Knock it off. Guys, this has been Operation Truth. Please feel free to contact us, operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. And we're going to be putting on more of these telecasts where you'll be able to call in and become part of the conversation. Guys, we're not looking for everybody that's like-minded to us also. We're very open and free thinkers. The thing you have to know about us is we love this country. I love this country more than I love my life. I understand this country. I've had the benefit of traveling it up and down, east and west. I've met all kinds of people here, which is how you just learn about people. You learn about yourself. And I just want you guys to know we're on track to try to create a movement here to maybe get this cuckoo back in the clock. I don't want to say I'm skeptical. I just want to say we should give it a run. Guys, this has been Operation Truth. Tom, thank you.
Thank you.
TJ, thank you. Producing this. Brian, thank you. Christian, thank you. And
You
we'll
too.
see you next episode.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, y'all.